Today, we'll explore how to create LinkedIn written content that helps you grow your business.
This is one of the biggest opportunities. I think a lot of folks have this misconception that it's just a bunch of AI slop content. There's a lot of people just trying to sell you in the DMs. You have to be good at content. You kind of got to know how to capture somebody's attention. You have to become a better communicator. Humans, we are designed and wired to be selfish, right? This selfish brain served us at one point. And so if we think about that as creators on these platforms, at least 90% of my content has to be for the reader. Most creators are clicking publish or post and only thinking about them. Did I sound smart here? Did I share enough client testimonials here? We want to optimize for the share. For the folks that we work with, right? They're not just trying to be influencers or get a bunch of brand deals. Like, they're experts in what they do, and they're trying to maintain their authority. And so the biggest indicator that we're trying to optimize for is impact. I like to measure it through shares.
So you have some tips on how we can actually get more shares. My special guest is a LinkedIn growth strategist who helps executives and founders increase their impact and income utilizing LinkedIn. Her agency is Digital Kairos, and her cohort program is Brick by Brick. Kasey Brown, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Super excited to be here. Thank you, Michael. I'm doing good.
I can't wait to get into what we're going to get into today, but I'd love to start with your story. How did you get into LinkedIn? Take us on the journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild journey. So I have been a full-time entrepreneur for going on 6 years now. My background, I'll give a little bit of my background because I think it sheds light into this whole story, right? So went to school outside of Chicago at Northwestern, graduated from there with an economics degree. And the thing about Northwestern is that you really only have two options if you graduate with an economics degree. You can either go into investment banking or consulting. And so I decided I like talking with people, I like helping people. And so I went into the consulting route. But while I was in consulting, a lot of my projects and the things that I started to carve out for the work that I like to do was helping these companies or clients that we worked with leverage socials to impact their bottom line, right? The whole idea or thesis that I came up with during this time was if we can leverage this growing engine at the time of social media, then we can actually increase our profits, right? And so a lot of the corporate work that I was doing was still similar to the work that I'm doing now. In 2021, I decided, you know what, I want to take this full time and work with the clients that I want to work with. And so we started the agency full time in 2021. And since then, it has looked different. We have taken different vehicles, but the through line for everything that we are focused on and that I am frankly obsessed with is organic content and leveraging brand to build more of a moat, right? To build a greater advantage in this space, whether that is to sell physical products, whether that's to sell info products, right? Or whether that's just to increase your moat to hire on A players and A talent. And so what we do now, a lot of the focus that we focus on now is LinkedIn. A lot of the background that I had was in video. But the things that we do now are on LinkedIn. And the reason I'm super bullish on the platform of LinkedIn is because supply and demand is just in our favor, right? You guys have heard the stats. I'm sure there's tons of people over there with LinkedIn profiles. Only 1% of people actually even create content on the platform. And so my whole idea was if we can go on this platform and at least create mediocre content, right? Like, we probably can win on this platform. And so I love LinkedIn. I tell everybody, though, I am platform agnostic. I love a good opportunity. And I think LinkedIn is just this super untapped opportunity. And so we've switched all of our focus from even my own personal brand to LinkedIn. And now we solely even work with clients focusing on LinkedIn.
Well, and I would imagine a lot of what we're going to talk about is relevant on all the social platforms that allow this kind of content creation, the written word. But I'm really curious, you started out with video, I'm assuming it was short form video, and you went over to LinkedIn. Like, tell us about that journey, because that had to be quite a pivot.
Yeah, I don't know if this is quotable. I should have found out this fact, but I may be one of the only like TikTokers that has now converted to LinkedIn. But the thing about this, right? Like I just said, I'm platform agnostic, but I love a good opportunity. And I think for a while there, I was looking at short form, right? In 2021, 22, 23, and I'm like, this is one of the biggest opportunities. Everybody is here consuming, but not a lot of folks, especially in our world, were creating, leveraging short form specifically, even on platforms like TikTok. And so We started there. We learned a lot of principles there on these short form platforms. You have to be good at content. You kind of got to know how to capture somebody's attention. You have to become a better communicator. You got to get good at editing. And so I think even pursuing TikTok and Instagram and these short form platforms forced us, and I'm saying us as a team, to just become better creators, right? And then when I saw LinkedIn, it was a similar opportunity that I saw, like I said, in 2021, 22 on TikTok, where it's like, hey, there's a bunch of people here consuming, but not a lot of us creating, right? And so to me, there's huge arbitrage that I love taking advantage of. And so even the principles we'll talk about here today, transparently, I learned them and was forced to learn them because video forces you to get good, right? And now I just leverage those same principles where I can be pretty good on LinkedIn and still win.
I love it. And I just want to like double down on one important thing you said here twice, which is that most people on the socials are not creating content, they're consuming content. And there is a shortage, if you will, a glut, opportunity, a greenfield opportunity, right? For those that know how to create in all the various forms, because there isn't a lot of people creating. There's a lot of people consuming. So when it comes to LinkedIn, what do you see as one of the biggest kind of misconceptions or untruths, if you will, that a lot of people might be believing that others are talking about?
You know, you said, and I even emphasize, there's a lot of folks consuming. There's not a lot of people creating. I will also add in parallel to consuming, there's a lot of folks critiquing, consuming, not a lot of folks creating, right? And I bring this up because I think one of the biggest misconceptions of LinkedIn, a lot of folks have critiques around the content over there, the platform. Oh, it's a little cringy. Oh, it's a bit boring, right? Like it's not, maybe my people aren't over there. I think a lot of folks have, and I even had this misconception. Transparently, I was thinking about LinkedIn and pursuing that as a platform of scale probably since around 2022. I kept pushing back on it because I was like, LinkedIn. Like every time I would log into that app, it would just feel so cringy, so boring, right? And so I think a lot of folks feel like, or maybe have this misconception that there's not a lot of opportunity here on LinkedIn, and or it's just not a platform that I need to be on, right? It's just a bunch of AI slop content. There's a lot of people just trying to sell you in the DMs, and none of the cool kids are there, right? So maybe this isn't something I need to prioritize right now. But again, I have a different lens now, but I think that some of the things that I hear on LinkedIn, I think the other misconception is that you can just enter that space and push out AI slop style content and just win, right? Like, oh, it must just then be easy to win. And I think that's far from the truth to actually create impactful content on LinkedIn and win.
Love it. Okay. So we're zooming in on the written word. And I'm curious, what are the things waiting on the other side, the benefits, the upsides that will come if everybody pays attention to what we're going to talk about today and they do written word well on LinkedIn? Just curious what you're seeing from your lens.
Yeah, I think there's, and I do not say this lightly. I'm not one of these folks to just say things. I do not see a world where you take what we're about to go through, you take some of these principles we're about to go through, and you don't win on LinkedIn. Whether win for you looks like increasing your email list, making more sales, finding more clients, finding more customers, booking more speaking gigs. I do not believe that you can listen to this and be consistent on the platform and not win.
Love it. Okay, cool. So what you're telling us is I'm not a hype person.
Yeah,
Trust me.
I'm not. I am just a
I speak,
facts and numbers
I
person.
speak truth. I have a degree in economics. Okay. So it's all about the facts, right? And I love that. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about, before we get into like what we're going to talk about today, is there any groundwork we need to set? Any foundation stuff that we need to be thinking about when it comes to written content on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we'll go through this framework, right? And again, I hope this framework helps a lot of you guys. And this framework, again, I learned, it was forced to learn through video. But before this framework even makes sense, we really have to do the cliche boring work, right? The success is in the boring work, the work that a lot of people don't want to do. And just stay with me, right? Like this will sound boring, but then we'll get into some of the fun stuff. But we really have to understand first who we're talking to and what transformation we want them to have, right? I use the language ICP, ideal client or customer profile, right? I have to really understand when I go click post or publish or upload, right? Who is this for? And also, what do they get out of this, right? What's in it for them? What transformation do I want them to have? Another way when we're onboarding clients or when we're coaching folks for the transformation piece of this, I ask folks, hey, if somebody just followed you for 90 days, what would transformation would you hope they had? Right. And so I need to get clear first on who I'm serving. And then second, what transformation am I trying to help them with through my content? That's the baseline for this framework to even have success and to work.
Give us an example of who you're creating content for. Maybe you could just
Mm.
explain who your ideal customer is and what you're helping them solve for, just so people
Yeah.
can wrap their head around it. Because we're marketers here, okay? And this stuff, oh yeah, I know that. But the truth of the matter is, we don't sometimes fully process what it means. So give us
Yeah.
an example of what you're doing over there with your.
So ICP, right? I think it's one of these, or at least I challenge myself to revisit this quarterly and to continue double downing on it and getting more detailed on it. So maybe V1 of my ICP looks like, hey, I'm just trying to help people build brand online. Maybe V1 looks like that. That does not work here in 2026 because that does not cut through the noise, right? And so probably a V6 of our ICP looks like, hey, we work best with anybody that kind of falls into this bucket of speakers, coaches, consultants, right? And they're doing at least 20K a month already. And we help them build the systems for organic content so they can continue to scale their impact and their business, right? This is what a V6 of our ICP looks like. This only comes from looking at the clients that we work with, who do we work with best, who can we serve best, right? And we keep kind of solidifying that ICP. But that's generally how detailed I'm trying to get with an ICP. Like what do they look like? What keywords could I even put into LinkedIn and find them? Right? Maybe what schools they went to, what regions they're in, maybe some of their background that gives me certain signals of, kind of how their business can look now. But that's how detailed I want to get on my ICP. I want it to be as detailed as I could just hand over to a VA and they could go find those people by putting in keywords on LinkedIn.
Love it. Okay. So in your particular case, you're targeting people that are like authors, coaches, consultants, those kind of people that are making a certain amount of money and a desire to scale that, right? To maybe double or
Sure.
triple that, right? So what they're looking for is a path to growth. And that's really good, right? Because it's one thing to know who your ideal target is, but it's another thing to know what they actually desire, right? Because that's going to
Yes.
inform a lot of what we're going to talk about next. So, okay, we've got this groundwork built now. So what's the next thing we need to worry about or focus on maybe?
So after we have that ICP, and again, to your point, the transformation, like how am I trying to help them? Now I start creating the content, right? And this is where I've come up with this framework. I think the one key to understand, everybody asks me like, what's the biggest hack? How have you won on all of these platforms? The biggest thing that I understand is honestly human psychology. Humans, we are designed and wired to be selfish, right? The selfish brain served us at one point. Hey, you're hungry, go get food. Hey, you're cold, go seek shelter, right? And so our brains are designed to think about us, what's in it for us. And so if we think about that as creators on these platforms, at least 90% of my content has to be for the reader, right? It sounds cliche, but most creators are clicking publish or post and only thinking about them. Did I sound smart here? Did I share enough client testimonials here? Am I going to make a sale off of this? Right? But when the priority becomes, what is my ICP, my ideal person receiving from this? How am I helping them? Then people have this impact or a feeling when they're consuming your content like, holy cow, this was so good. Holy cow, this was great. Right? And then every time they see your name pop up, they want to just keep consuming and keep digesting that information. Right?
Or
So,
they might tag somebody who they know that fits that perfect audience too, right?
which is one thing we'll get into for the bottom of this framework, one of the things that we optimize for, right? And so once we kind of have that baseline, then we start putting this structure into our content.
Good. So let's start with your
All right,
structure.
let's dive in. I just want to make sure we're good to roll in. All right. So the first, I like little little fun words and little acronyms to come up with for these frameworks, most importantly, to help myself remember these things. But the first thing that we have to do is get the stop, right? So the first letter of this, they're all going to be S's, but the first one is stop, right? It's super important because as humans, as consumers, right, we are all just scrolling through. As the creator, my number one job is to get somebody to stop, right? We've heard this before. I got to stop the scroll. This is important. And again, I was forced to learn this on video, right? There's different things we would do to get the stop. When it comes to written content, the biggest levers that we have to get the stop, especially on LinkedIn, are our first two lines, right? The sentences. Most importantly, the biggest thing that we can use to get the stop is the photo that we push or, attach to our actual post. So we have the photo and we have the first two lines of text to get the stop, right? Now, one little tip for photos, because you might hear this and you might just say, okay, Kasey, let me just go attach a photo to everything. Biggest tips that I have for photos is, again, you want to put yourself in the shoes of the average person scrolling LinkedIn, but also the average creator on LinkedIn. And so you want to use a photo that has some sort of pattern interrupt. This is why you start seeing a lot of people using selfies and things like that. We work with a lot of authorities, a lot of experts. They don't love just using selfies. We use a lot of infographics, right? But even for those infographics, we want that infographic to stand out, right? We want it to, as somebody's scrolling through, we want somebody to have the feeling of like, holy cow, what's this? Or if something's in bold, like, oh, what does that say? Or what does this mean, right? A little tactical tip for photos is that you can use vertical photos more than horizontal photos. So a vertical photo, right? If I'm holding my phone vertically and take a selfie, or if I have an infographic and it looks more like a document instead of like, a traditional photo. Exactly, right? I want to go.
Yeah, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to go more vertical. This again, as I'm going through the scroll, I'm just taking up more space in the feed, so I have a higher chance to get somebody to stop and at least look at my post, right? So the first thing I have to do is get the stop. And so there's some tactics there for the photo, and then there's some tactics for the text as well. So photo.
Let me ask some clarification questions on the photo. If we do a regular photo on our phone, which is like 9:16 instead of 16:9, approximately, right? What part of that is shown? Does it get cropped? Does it get shrunk with little black lines on the sides? Like, tell us a little bit about like structurally what that might look like on mobile and what that might look like on desktop.
Yep. So the beauty about this is, again, if I just take a selfie on my phone, or again, I do this a lot with infographics or guides, I'll actually take a screenshot and just crop it on my phone and make sure that the dimensions are the same as a selfie. The beautiful piece about this is it doesn't get cropped on LinkedIn. As I just upload it, the entire thing will show, right? The entire thing shows and takes up more space in that feed.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. So if that's true, then we got to get strategic about what in the world we include inside that photo, right? So tell us about the kinds of things. Let's start with just like, simple smartphone pictures. You know what I mean? Like any particular tips on if you're going to actually take a selfie, you know what I mean? Like any tips on how we should do that. And then we can also talk about like the other kinds of images that you'd recommended, but yeah, go for it.
Biggest tip if you're going to take a selfie is to use your back camera. So back camera, you're going to go into 0.5, right? So it's a little different than just using your front camera taking the selfie. You're going to go 0.5, turn your phone around and use your back camera, right?
That's like a super wide angle shot, right? Basically.
Super wide. Why? It gives me more of the background, right? It just brings somebody, which I'll talk about here in a second, the 5 C's. It makes the viewer a little bit more curious. It gives more things in the background to just be curious about, to even help that scroll stop a bit more, right? So little hack there, use your back camera, go into your wide angle, 0.5, I use an iPhone, and then upload something like that.
Okay, so for writing stuff on LinkedIn about business, like what kind of should we just be taking selfies everywhere we go so we have a big library of them? I mean, like talk to us a little bit about this.
You can. I did a stage talk maybe 2 months ago, and we got the most leads ever on any like lead magnet or anything we've created. And all I did was on the stage, I had one job to remember, and I took a photo, a selfie, like I'm explaining to you guys. I turned my phone around, I did 0.5. I had the entire audience in there, and it was me on stage, right? We uploaded that photo. with like, hey, if you want my slides from this presentation, just comment slides. We got 3,000 leads from that post.
Wow.
I posted it again because I just wanted to test it, right? I posted it again with one of the professional photos that I got from that speaking engagement, right? Me on stage presenting with a little microphone, very high res, nice photo. Posted again, hey, if you want my slides, we got 200 leads
Okay.
from that, right? And so this is the power of just leveraging a photo. The thing about this, right? Everybody on LinkedIn, the ones that are creating, are uploading some version of that professional headshot, the professional speaking thing, right? And so me doing a pattern interrupt with a selfie of me on the stage, right? Not the best lighting or anything, it stood out. And I always tell our folks that we work with, we don't have to be better, we have to be different. And so there are just some little tweaks that we can make to just stand out. Like, okay, I'll use this kind of crappy selfie to promote this speech that we just did, and we get a couple thousand leads off of that.
You also mentioned something unusual, which is the idea of creating some sort of a infographic, for lack of better words, or chart or something like that. I would imagine this is where AI can come in really handy for this kind of stuff. Is this, or Canva or something like that? Is that the kind of stuff you're recommending?
Yep. So a little hack that I use now when we're doing our sessions, I do these office hours with our clients once a week. And there's always some good question, right? And so after that, I'll note what question was pretty good. I'll run it through Claude. I mostly use Claude. Hey, this person asked me this question. Here is my answer. I want to make a full guide on this, a one pager, right? Or an infographic. I use one pagers a lot. But I'll run that through Claude and it'll help me make a little infographic, right? And then I'll take that infographic and just upload it to LinkedIn. Hey guys, today in office hours, X person asked this really great question. I wanted to lay out my entire answer here. You'll find it below. And I will attach an infographic or a one pager, something that looks like a little screenshot of a Google document. I'll attach something like that. And again, it just pattern interrupts. My ICP, they see it, what looks like a screenshot of a Google Doc, and they're like, oh my gosh, you must have like leaked something important, or I'm looking at, one of your SOPs, right? And so it just has that sort of like pattern interrupt. And we also, again, use those for infographics.
What about a picture of your computer screen with that on it? Do you think something like
Yes,
that could work?
that. And another thing that I've done, I have a TV here in my office. I'll pull up the like infographic or whatever on the TV screen, and I'll include my face in it, and I'll
There you
point
go.
to it, right?
There you
Like,
go.
hey, I just created this. Do you want it? Right.
I
The
love it.
worst thing that you can do though, when it comes to infographics, is just start with like, maybe I have an infographic about the framework we're about to talk about today. And what I see all the time is people just kind of have some sort of graphic that says framework for winning on LinkedIn. And that's it. Like that's the graphic, right? Instead of just having the full framework with all the information. And so if you are just uploading an infographic or a graphic and not a selfie, make sure that graphic is packed with value.
Love it. Okay, let's get back to the hook. The first two lines, which I think we're calling the hook. How many words on average do we have before that see more or whatever shows up? I mean, like talk to us a little bit about how we can do that hook and make that work with that graphic.
So you have about 3 lines, right? I like to use line breaks, so that takes away one of my lines. So you have around like 2 lines or 2 sentences per se, right? And again, our main job with these 2 words, or excuse me, these 2 sentences in the photo is actually to obviously, yes, get somebody to stop. When they do stop, I need them to click see more. Like then that's my next job, right? So first job, and we really leverage the photo to get them to stop, or the graphic to get them to stop. And then along with that text and the pairing of the photo, I want to get them to click see more, right? Now, how do I do this? Within the text part and a little bit of the photo, I want to have the reader feeling one of the 5 C's. Now, the 5 C's is really some sort of tool that we came up with. I learned it just in copy. We used it for videos, but really the 5 C's just stand for curiosity, contrast, contradiction, controversy, confusion, right? I'll use the last one for an example. Maybe the pairing of my 2 lines plus the photo, I want the reader to be a little bit confused, right? Or I want them to rest in a state now of curiosity, right? I'll share an example here in a second, but I want them to feel something. I use the 5 C's to help simplify it. And what I usually say is a good hook, meaning the 2 lines and the photo pairing, kind of will force a reader to feel or have at least 2 to 3 of the 5 C's. So there will be a little mix of confusion, curiosity, contradiction, right? But the best posts we've published have 2 to 3 of the 5 C's. An example of this in play, right? I'll say this out loud so everybody can visualize this. I had a friend that posted a photo. They're on vacation in Bali, right? So they'll post a little photo, great scenery. They take all of my advice. They go point 0.5. You can see the beach, you see the ocean in the background, you see their kids playing. And the first text or the text that they've included there is like, on vacation in Bali, having a great summer, right? They click upload. That's what most people do. Hey, I'm in Bali with the kids, having fun, work-life balance, yada, 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 right? That really doesn't give me any of the 5 C's, right? I'm not really confused. There's no controversy in there. There's no contradiction in there. It's just you posting on vacation, right? That's almost a self-serving post. How we can change this a bit to even have more of those 5 C's is something like this. 2021, I was at a job I hated. 2026, line break. 2026, I just spent $30K to come here, ... right? 2 lines and the photo of you on this beautiful beach. I'm curious, where are you? Right? There's some contradiction there. What happened between 2021 and 2026? Like, what's going on? Right? There's some confusion. There might even be, to some folks, there might be some controversy. Why would you spend $30,000 to go to the beach? Right? And so that's what I mean by literally same photo, but that's how now we can use the text to make you feel something and make the brain, the consumer's brain, the reader's brain need to click see more, right?
I love it. And as I said earlier, folks, this is just as valid on some of the other social platforms like Facebook and also on X, because you can do the exact same thing with the long form content there. Love it. Okay. So we've talked about the 5 C's, which I think are curiosity, controversy, contrast, contradiction, and confusion. It sounds like I got them all there. And then the photo, right? We got to get that down. We spent a lot of time on the image and then those first couple lines. So this is just to stop the scroll. So this is the beginning, right? This is not the end of the story. So what happens next? Because this is stage 1 of 2 more steps here. What's next?
Yes. So after we've done our job and we've at least gotten to stop, this is the hardest job, right? 80% of the performance or the impressions that we get is going to just be really optimizing the stop. So once we've done the hard part and we've gotten somebody to stop, we now have to earn the right to keep their attention, or what I also call, we have to get them to stay. So stop, the second letter is, or the second S is stay, right? Stop, second letter is S, stay. So now we need to get them to stay. Couple things that we need to do here, right? A first thing that we need to do is rehook them. So the third line, once they click see more, we have to confirm the click. People say this a lot on YouTube. We would talk about this a lot when we would do YouTube videos and things like that. But we now have to confirm the click, right? So we now have to show them with this third line, this is going to be an interesting story, or you're about to learn something here, right? We want to just give them a little rehook with that third line.
Give us an example of this, because I don't think everybody in my audience understands the confirm the click concept.
Yeah. So confirming the click, right, with this rehook, what I tell our team, our writers, our clients all the time is that this third line, we still want to have some tension, right? And so if we think about this in the movies or a really good Instagram reel or a YouTube video, you might be brought in because of the hook on a YouTube video. You might be brought in because of the thumbnail and the title. But within those first kind of like 60 seconds of a YouTube video, you're confirming if you want to watch this thing all the way through, right? And so the best creators, they know what to do kind of 60 seconds into a long form video or 3 seconds into a short form video or the third line on a written post. It's to create some more tension, a rehook. So example, back to this Bali example, 2021, I hated my job. 2026, I just spent $30K to come here. Third line, I want to create some more tension instead of just giving away the whole story. So the wrong way to do this would be as soon as they click see more, it's like, hey, I'm here in Bali, like just something pretty boring. Hey, I'm here in Bali with the family and friends. I took 5 weeks off of my business. It's thriving without me, right? Instead of just kind of giving away the story or just cutting to the chase there, we want to do some buildup. So 2026, I spent $30K to be here. Just click see more. It was a wild dream that I had last February. I never thought I could actually leave my business and spend this amount of money to come here, especially when I had so many fires going on in the business and it felt like everything was going to fall apart. But somehow I made it, right? There's three more lines of tension just continuing to bring you into the story.
Yeah, I love this. What I'm hearing you say here is that you should address some things. In this particular part of the story, it was like, I didn't believe this was possible for me, right? Or I didn't think I could pull this off given all the new obligations that I have, right? And so that is something that is really strategic because this goes back to that ideal customer profile, right? You're probably going to be very strategic about picking something that you know is also one of their fears and concerns, right?
Yep. Yes. I always say we want our content to feel like a greeting card. You know, when you receive a greeting card, it might even just say, Happy birthday, Michael, but it means something to you because of who it's from. You're like, wow, like, thank you. That card would mean nothing else to me, right? I want
Right.
my content to feel like, oh my gosh, you're talking right to me. Like, this is how I'm feeling. And to your point, we were able to do that with that rehook, right?
Okay, cool.
After we have a pretty good rehook and some tension, right? Now we just want to make sure structurally our post is set up where they can consume the whole thing. This is where I will leverage AI as a tool to kind of help me here. I think of AI as like a sparring partner, a thought partner, not the thought leader. And so this is my where I take my first draft and I'll throw it into AI and say, hey, you know, remove any words or sentences that don't move this story forward because I want to keep the person's attention, right? I want to earn their attention with each line. And so just a little keyword there, remove any fillers or sentences that do not move the story forward. And the other prompt I'll sometimes give AI, or if it's just myself, I'll analyze the post like this and put yourself in the shoes of the average LinkedIn user. They're on the train going home. They're just consuming some LinkedIn, you know, before their next meeting. Is this post optimized to get them to read the entire thing? Right. And one of the things I will add sometimes is, in the prompt is grade my post on the stay out of 10, right? What are the chances somebody reads this entire post on a scale of 1 to 10? And so I'll also leverage AI to kind of just like help me clean it up and help me make sure the structure is optimized in a way that the average LinkedIn person who's just scanning, right? We're all just scanning, is able to consume the entire thing.
What have you learned from the criticism that Claude has been giving you about your content? Like, have you learned some tips on how to kind of like progress the story along?
So a couple things. I'm a yapper, so Claude likes to rip my content to pieces and give me back a very short version. Like, here you go. But a couple of things that I do try to optimize for. I try to optimize for rhythm, and this is what we also do. We ghostwrite for some clients as well. This is the thing that I always have to reinforce with our teams. I will say AI will really shorten the heck out of everything. But I believe that humans actually start progressing through stories with some rhythm. What does rhythm look like and mean? That might mean like, hey, 4 just sentences, right? And then on the 5th block of text, maybe there's 3 or 4 sentences instead of just breaks, line breaks after every sentence. And so we like to give the post some rhythm. I think right now, too, it has become a signal of like, oh, AI must have just wrote this whole thing if there's just tons of line breaks. And so we like to mix it up, maybe 3 or 4 one-liners, and then we get to, you know, 3 sentences in a block, then maybe 2 sentences, then maybe back to 1 sentence. So we give it some rhythm. The other little tidbit I'll give here that I've learned by going back and forth as a sparring partner with Claude is that the best posts that continue to have a 10 out of 10 or at least a 9 out of 10 on the stay metric, these posts are at a 4th to 7th grade reading level. 4th to 7th grade reading level. And so another thing that I'll do before, I'm pretty savvy with it now for my own writing, but before I go upload, maybe for others, I'll run it through Hemingway, right? Hemingway, and just make sure that the grade level is at 4th to 7th grade. People
Explain what
might,
that is. I don't know if everybody knows what Hemingway is.
yep. So Hemingway, if you just go to type in Hemingway, it's like a web platform, and you can just copy and paste in your actual content, right? So if you're even doing an email, a Slack message, what have you, you could just copy and paste it in, and then it will grade it and tell you what reading level this piece of content is. So it'll analyze the post.
Can AI do that too?
AI can do it. I've had more success for some reason with Hemingway doing it.
Awesome. What about shorter sentences? Have you found any? Because I mean, I have a background as a copywriter, so short sentences are like my buddy, my friend. You know what I mean? Because it
Yeah.
just makes it easier for the brain to consume it. Like
Yeah.
really short sentences sometimes, like taking a really long compound sentence and break them into shorter sentences. Have you found that that works for the content that
Yes.
you're creating? Yeah.
I have found that it works well, right? Humans, most of us are just scanning, right?
Yeah.
As we go through it. I have learned that it works best, as I said, even with some rhythm within that post. So if
Right.
every line is just super short, right? People will kind of get bored of that. And so what I like to do is the points that I really want to emphasize or the points that I really want my ICP to take away, I will use those really short sentences to really make them stand out.
Okay, you mentioned that you wanted this thing optimized for a stay for someone who might be just on a train or in a taxi or whatever on, doom scrolling for lack of better words. How do we do that? I mean, like, is there anything other than what we just talked about that involves optimizing this for the mobile reader?
Yeah. So one other tidbit, again, I'll say one thing that you can do, or the biggest thing, is removing any filler words, any sentences that again do not move the story forward. I think that's 90% of the stay. One thing that I do as well is I always upload on mobile. And so I'll type everything out on LinkedIn, or excuse me, here on my desktop, and maybe even in the LinkedIn platform. I'll save it as a draft. And then I open up my phone to just scan it on mobile, right? Sometimes the short sentences here on your desktop look pretty large, like large blocks of text on mobile. And so,
Oh, so you'll like paste it in like as a draft on LinkedIn on the mobile app? Okay.
exactly,
Yeah, 'cause
exactly,
then you realize, oh, that is a huge paragraph, right? That's probably too
exactly.
big, right? Okay.
Exactly. And then there's other tools that you can use to kind of like preview it before it goes live. We use a tool called Authored Up to do that, and it'll also show you like the mobile, what it looks like on mobile. But again, I want to optimize mostly for mobile, right? 70% of folks are scrolling on LinkedIn on mobile. So I do want to optimize to make sure that they're able to scan and kind of stay if they're on their mobiles as well.
Let's talk a little bit about story a little bit and story arcs and stuff like that because we
Yeah.
spent a lot of time talking about the hook. We spent a lot of time talking about little hacks and tips for lack of better words. But you did mention that we should progress through a story. I feel like I heard you say that. Do you have any sense of how long of a story we should tell? And
Mm.
you know, some people are going to say is as long as it takes, but maybe that's not ideal for mobile. So talk to me a little bit about like, especially if you said you're a yapper, you probably like to tell really long stories and maybe that doesn't
Yes.
work.
Yes. So I think it is, you hear about this on short form a lot, like find a series, right? Find a format that really works and you start to become like identified or synonymous with. I think a format or a series or a structure style that I've become synonymous with is pretty long post, right? And so a lot of the things that I put out there are pretty long. They're pretty heavy with data. I love numbers. I love research. And so a lot of my posts tend to lean that way. If you go look at somebody, I was actually just breaking this down. I was working with a group of doctors last night. And so I was breaking down a few profiles. One of the profiles we started to analyze was Adam Grant. Adam Grant, his whole link, or I should say, probably like 70% of what he's posting on LinkedIn, he has around 5 million followers on LinkedIn, are these things that look like little tweets, right? They're the things you probably just make them in Canva. They look like a
Oh
graphic
yeah,
of
like
a
a
tweet,
screenshot of a tweet or something.
a
Okay.
screenshot of a tweet, right? And he's putting those things out, and maybe max there's 12 sentences on that, right? Because it's supposed to look like a tweet. Or maybe some of them have 5 sentences on there. But that is a format. He also posts these on Instagram. That's a format that he's become synonymous with. He's able to take these peer-reviewed research articles and papers, and he distills them for the average person to understand and take away. And so when it comes to like, hey, what's the best length, or what are some tips for like long or short? Like, what should I do? I always tell people again, who's our ICP? What transformation are we trying to have for them? And once we answer that, the answers around length or structure start to appear. And I also believe that the length and the structure and the format start to become synonymous with who we are and start standing out almost like a short form video series on Instagram or TikTok.
Now, as a guy that's a really long form writer, because I've written books, there is a limit to how long your LinkedIn post can be. And I'm
Yes.
sure you've hit it and I've hit it. You probably know it better than I do, but what is it? A certain number of words or something like that? Do you have any
Yeah, I
sense?
think it's 3,000 characters or something like that. There's this funny thing that I started to do because I was very long winded. I've shortened it up again with some of these AI tools. But if I had something really good and I was like, I'm getting it out there, I would just take the rest of it and just continue it in the comment section. And
Oh,
so
there you go.
you,
Okay.
yeah, and I actually saw, I might get back to it. I actually think that we are in this habit as consumers to go look in the comment section, right? And when we're consuming, we're very used to clicking on comments. And to the point around stay, I want somebody to stay on my post as long as, as long as possible. And so I think even having some more details in the comments was allowing people to stay more. And I actually saw them engaging a lot with that second half of that post in the comments. So a little tactic there.
Okay. So far, step one is to stop the scroll, and step two is stay, get them to stay. We have one more step, which is another S. So what is
Yes. Triple S, triple S. So first S, get the stop, hardest thing that we got to do. Second S, get the stay, second hardest thing that we have to do. Earn the right for that person to keep consuming your content, right? And lastly, we want to optimize for the share. The third S is share. Stop, stay, share, right? And share, a lot of people talk about impressions or views, or even likes or comments, right? To me, shares it's a lagging indicator, but it's an indicator of impact. And for the folks that we work with, right, they're not just trying to be influencers or get a bunch of brand deals. Like they're experts in what they do and they're trying to maintain their authority in this field, right? And so the biggest indicator that we're trying to optimize for is impact, right? And how do we measure impact on socials? I like to measure it through shares because if somebody is sharing, or on LinkedIn, we call it a repost, that just didn't fit in my framework. Stop, stay, repost. So stop, stay, share. But if somebody's reposting my work or sharing even an Instagram video with somebody, something in that piece of content must have been impactful, right? In some way. If we're not on the entertainment side of the house, it must have been pretty impactful piece of content. And so what we like to analyze to just measure, like, how are we doing when it comes to posting isn't the views, it's not the comments, it's mostly the shares to impressions ratio. And shares to impressions ratio is really just looking at how many shares, or again, reposts, whatever that platform calls it, how many shares do we get divided by how many impressions. And that gives us a good gauge on, hey, was this a pretty impactful piece of content? And if not, what can we change to optimize this a bit more where more people would share it?
okay? This seems like the hardest thing to achieve.
It
Um,
is.
only, you know, getting the stay is hard, but getting a share is really, 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 really hard, right?
Yeah.
So, and obviously, I don't think there's an actual metric you're going to find in the analytics and social platforms. This is a metric you've made up that we're going to have to calculate ourselves, right?
Correct.
So, you have some tips on how we can actually get more shares? Because I would imagine, because we're doing the written word, we can signal that this is something that people ought to do. So, any tips on how to do this?
Yep. And it really comes back to what we talked about at the front half of this, right? Again, if I understand who I'm talking to and make sure at least 90% of posts have some sort of transformation for them, there will be some sort of share activity. Share activity even looks like, hey, I'm sharing this to myself to read later because it was so good. This was so impactful, right? And so it is hard. Well, I should say, it's simple, but it's not easy, right? The more that we can have concrete takeaways within our post for somebody to actually go share with a team member or share with a friend, or again, share with themselves to read later, that's when I know that we're making impactful content. An example here that I can give for everyone too, and I'll also break down, if you do this calculation, I'll break down what is a good shares to impressions ratio. But we can take this Bali post, the same post that we've been talking about, right? So we have a good hook in the front half. We've structured it in a nice way that the folks are consuming it. It's a good story arc here, right? There's some good rhythm with the sentence structure. And now we're at the end of our post. We want to make sure there's a transformation. We want to make sure there's some sort of takeaway, right? So again, the average person that's on vacation, they could post the selfie, hey, I'm on vacation with the family. Somebody that's optimizing for the share, they're going to have some sort of structure of like, here's how I did it to this point around. Hey, in 2021, I hated my life. In 2026, I just spent 30K to be here. After I kind of take them through the story, the ending of this post is going to be, and here's how you can go do it. Step one, go, audit your time. Step three, like whatever that is. But the ending of a really good post is going to have a takeaway for the reader. Again, how did I come up with this? You just put yourself in the average human. We're all thinking about ourselves. And so if the ending of that post, you brought me in, with the story, and you've given me then something that I can go take back. That's like a goodie bag when you leave a party, right? It's like, wow, thank you. There's some transformation here for me. When we do something like that, then I am sharing it with my friend who's at their job that they hate. I am sharing it with my network, like, wow, this is such a great read. I am sharing it to myself to, hey, go read this later to make sure I got all the steps here, right? And maybe even commenting to capture the lead magnet, to get this resource that you might be promoting, right? And so it's simple, but it's not easy. But if we can make sure at least 90% of our posts end with some exact takeaway and transformation for our consumer, for our reader, then we are optimizing for the share.
Can we count tagging in of a friend as a share?
You can. There are some tactics for that, right? Of like, hey, tag, a friend that needs to see this. Hey, share this with a friend that needs to see this. Sometimes a little tactic that we may use is like share this with your network if it was valuable, right? So there's some little tactics that we can do there. But those tactics only work, again, if the actual takeaway and transformation is pretty solid and pretty good.
So what's a good metric?
So good metrics. So you take your shares, or again, if we're talking just LinkedIn, your repost, and the analytics will show you this. So you take that number, divide it by your impressions, or if it's another platform, divide it by your views. And 0.3 is what we want to see. 0.3, right? So 0.3 is pretty good.
1% basically is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. 0.3 is what we want to see. Like that's pretty solid. That's solid. Now, if we see 0.5 or above, 0.5 or above, that thing is great. That's great. And that's actually a little trick here. That's actually something that we'll repost every 60 to 90 days. So we will repost that exact piece of content. If it's at a 0.5, we repost that same text, same photo every 60 to 90 days. Again, shares to impression is showing us impact. Right. And so I'm here on these platforms to make impact. I believe income follows impact. And so whenever I find something that, this must have been pretty good, a lot of people share this, I'm going to repost that every 60 to 90 days. If we see anything around a 0.0, 0.02, absolute garbage, X that out. We never want to post that again, right? Or at least in that framework.
Yeah.
So,
or maybe we just take another stab at it, right? And
take another stab at it.
It's accomplishing all the things we've talked about today. Kasey Brown, for those that cannot see, you have a hat on that says creative, and this has been a very creative discussion. I know there's going to be people that want a lot more of you. So where can they find you? And if they're interested in possibly working with you, where should they go?
Yeah. So YouTube is obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am there, Kasey Brown. I think YouTube is where you're going to get the most valuable content. YouTube is not a platform I'm trying to optimize for or anything. So I just love to go on there and yap and just share exactly what we're doing. So you can go search Kasey Brown, Kasey Brown on YouTube. And also there, you also find different ways to work with us, work with our team. So YouTube is probably the best place to connect and learn more.
Kasey, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Michael.